This is Presstitutes, and so let's get going. Presstitutes was a term coined by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, and this is taken from his website. Was Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy and Associate Editor of the Wall Street Journal. He was a columnist for Business Week, Scripps Howard's News Service, Creator Syndicate. He's had many university appointments. His internet columns have attracted a worldwide following. Roberts's latest books are The Failure of the Laissez-Faire Capitalism and Economic Dissolution of the West, How America Was Lost, and The Neoconservative Threat to the World Order. Um, anyways, this is his article, and he talks about prostitutes. And he says, this morning I was stuck in front of a Fox News broadcast for a short period and then an NPR news program. It was enough to convince me that Nazi propaganda during Hitler's Third Reich was very mild compared to the constant stream of dangerous lies that are pumped out constantly by the American media. And it goes on, did you know that all the trouble in Syria was due to the Russians and Assad? The U.S. has no blame whatsoever. The U.S. is trying to fight ISIS, which is U.S. created and aids and abets. But the evil Russians and Assad are fighting the innocent democratic rebels who are trying to bring democracy to Syria as a replacement for a brutal dictator who was elected by a majority vote. The Russians are also bombing schools and hospitals, collateral damage when the U.S. does it, but war crimes when the Russians are accused of it. The accusers had no evidence for their accusations against Russia beyond unverified claims of the U.S. government, despite non-existent Iraqi weapons of mass destruction and non-existent Iranian nukes and non-existent use of chemical weapons by Assad. Anyways, so this is about prostitutes. You can't believe a word the American media says. If they say anything correct, it's just an accident. A cynical, mercenary, demagogic press will produce in time people as base as itself. And that's by Joseph Pulitzer of the Pulitzer Prize. Next, the statesman will invent cheap lies, putting the blame upon the nation that is attacked, and every man will be glad of those conscience-soothing falsities and will diligently study them and refuse to examine any refutations of them, and thus he will by and by convince himself that the war is just and will thank God for the better sleep he enjoys after his process of grotesque self-deception. And that's Mark Twain. And I mean, think about it, people. Isn't that kind of like what's going on now? In the United States, both the Republican and Democratic parties, with only a few prominent exceptions, have been and are in the pay of the corporate media and communication giants. And that's John Nichols and Robert Chesney. And think about it, isn't that, I mean, Donald Trump is getting so much flack because he's not in the pay. The press is our chief ideological weapon, and that was a quote by Nikita Khrushchev. Media manipulation in the U.S. today is more efficient than it was in Nazi Germany because here we have the pretense that we're getting all the information we want. That misconception prevents people from even looking for the truth. Do not fear the enemy, for your enemy can only take your life. It is far better that you fear the media, for they will steal your honor. That awful power, the public opinion of a nation, is created in America by a horde of ignorant, self-complacent simpletons who failed at ditching and shoemaking and fetched up in journalism on their way to the poorhouse. The media want to maintain their intimate relation to state power. They want to get leaks. They want to get invited to the press conferences. They want to rub shoulders with the Secretary of State and all that kind of business. To do that, you've got to play the game. Playing the game means telling their lies and serving as their disinformation apparatus. There are laws to protect the freedom of press's speech, but none that are worth anything to protect the people from the press. Whoever controls the media controls the mind. The business of journalists is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And what folly is this toasting an independent press? We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. And that is John Swinton, former chief of staff of the New York Times. And this is a video from, or not a video, an article from a blacklisted website. New York Times admits that virtually every major news organization allows the news to be censored by government officials. And in the very first sentence, it says, in one of the most shocking articles that the New York Times has ever put out, a New York Times reporter has openly admitted that virtually every major mainstream news organization allows government bureaucrats and campaign officials to censor their stories. And it goes on. The following quotes come from the recent article in the New York Times mentioned above, and it is absolutely jaw-dropping. The quotations come back redacted, stripped of colorful metaphors, colloquial language, and even anything even mildly provocative. They are sent by email from the Obama headquarters in Chicago to reporters who have interviewed campaign officials under one major condition: the press office has veto power over what statements can be quoted and attributed by name. Most reporters, desperate to pick the brains of the president's top strategists, grudgingly agree. After the interviews, they review their notes, check their tape recorders, and send in the juiciest sound bites for review. The verdict from the campaign, an operation that prides itself on staying consistently on script, is often no. Barack Obama does not approve this message. What all of this means is that both the Obama campaign and the Romney campaign essentially have veto power over any quotes from those campaigns that we see in the newspapers. So this isn't just Obama. This was during the last election, and it included the Romney campaign was doing the same thing. According to the New York Times, virtually every major news organization has agreed to submit their quotes for quote approval. Ooh, ooh, ooh. This is absolutely disgusting, and it goes against everything that our media is supposed to stand for. And it goes on. Today, the same article talks about today, 6 colossal media giants power overall arrest. Much of the information in the chart below comes from MediaOwners.com. The chart below reveals only a small fraction of the media outlets that these 6 behemoths actually own. So the first one is Time Warner, and that's the list of corporations that they own, including Turner Broadcasting, Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network, all sorts of them here. Sports Illustrated, People Magazine. These are all owned by Time Warner. The Disney. Okay, Disney owns ABC Television. I think that's kind of interesting. Of course, they own Disney Publishing and the Disney Channel, but there's a lot of other stuff they own. Some of the stuff we know about and some of the stuff we didn't. Viacom owns Paramount Pictures, Comedy Central, Country Music Television, MTV, Nickelodeon. They like to obviously have influence on the children. And News Corporation, that's Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation. And the Dow Jones Company, the New York Post, they own a bunch of them. Fox Business, Fox Kids, Fox News. So all of the Fox stuff is owned by Rupert Murdoch. FX, 20th Century Fox, DirecTV. There's a bunch of them there that are owned by Rupert Murdoch. And so let's get in closer so we can see them all here. There's a bunch. MySpace is owned by Rupert Murdoch. Star TV, 20th Century Fox, DirecTV, and here's more. These are all owned by Rupert Murdoch and the News Corporation. Okay, so CBS owns CBS News, obviously. Showtime, CBS Radio, Infinity Broadcasting. So they own a bunch too. And NBC Universal owns CNBC, that's obvious, and MSNBC. NBC Television, NBC Sports, Oxygen, Sci-Fi, USA Network. Those are all owned by NBC. Universal. So please keep in mind, it goes on to say, please keep in mind that the list above is not exhaustive. It only contains a sampling of the companies that those 6 corporate giants own. So are you starting to see how powerful they are? If you ever wondered why the version of the news that you get is so similar, no matter where you turn, it's because control of the news is concentrated in just a very few hands. So who controls the six big media corporations? Would it surprise you to know that the boards of directors of these big six media corporations have a tremendous amount of overlap, and the boards with the boards of directors of large banks, large oil companies, and large pharmaceutical companies? Gee, that sounds like the New World Order crowd. The following is from the Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting website. Media corporations share members of the boards of directors with a variety of other large corporations, including banks, investment companies, oil companies, healthcare and pharmaceutical companies, and technology companies. Well, that sounds like who's who of the New World Order. How you can find a list that shows how these boards of directors overlap and interlock here. Okay, so you can go to that website, that article on blacklisted.com, and find this. You have to search for this particular article because this was done in January of this year, so it's not that recent. Giant media corporations are not going to criticize the establishment because they are the establishment. The messages that these media behemoths pound into our heads are going to be the messages that the establishment wants pounded into our heads. They're trumpeting their party line. It's propaganda, people. Anybody that believes the mainstream media is independent and that it does not have an agenda is being delusional. Of course, it is also worth mentioning that much of what we get from the mainstream media is often directly controlled by the government. Okay, so, and it goes on. The former Washington Post reporter Carl Bernstein have discovered that hundreds of American journalists have worked directly for the CIA. Well, you know what they say, once you're with the company, you're always company. Not that the federal government and the establishment are opposed to one another. The truth is that they are very much work hand in hand. But sometimes the federal government has slightly different priorities than the corporate establishment does. In any event, the key point to take away from all this is that the news and entertainment that we all enjoy on a daily basis, if very highly censored and very highly controlled. It is imperative that we understand that those that own and control the media are trying to shape society in a certain way. They want to impose their values and their vision of the future on the rest of us. You will notice that none of the major news corporations or organizations speak out against the big brother police state control grid that is going in all around us. Instead, they insist that this added security will keep us safe even as our liberties and freedoms are being badly eroded. You will notice that none of the major news organizations speak out against the population control agenda of the global elite. Instead, they insist that more family planning will help the environment and make the world a more prosperous place for the rest of us. You will notice that none of the major news organizations speak out against the Federal Reserve, and none of them are warning us about the financial collapse that is rapidly approaching. Instead, they tell us to keep having faith in the system, and they promise us that everything is going to be okay. Boy, I feel so much better now. I just feel so much better. Well, you can mindlessly believe what the corporate media if you want, but I believe that in this day and age, it is absolutely imperative that we all learn to think for ourselves. Don't be a mindless robot for anyone. Think for yourself and make your own decisions. The truth is out there, and you can find it if you're willing to search for it. And that's the alternative media. And so this is the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. And abolition of private property and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Well, if you're a U.S. citizen, then you live in D.C., and I don't care if you're in Texas. If you're a U.S. citizen, you're still in D.C. And so that has definitely been implemented in D.C. A heavy progressive and graduated income tax, that's definitely been implemented. Abolition of all rights of inheritance, that's definitely been implemented. Confiscation of all property of immigrants and rebels. Well, think about it, people. What do you think the proceeds of crime seizures are all about? We covered that in my last video or a recent video. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Gee, isn't that's obviously been implemented with the called the Federal Reserve, people. Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. Gee, that sounds like the bought and paid for news media. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state and bringing into cultivation of waste lands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. Gee, that sounds like all of the stuff about the uh, the all of the stuff about these wastelands, these wetlands, and all this other stuff. Equal liability to all labor, establishing industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Well, gee, that sounds like the Becerro program where they're importing foreign labor to do all this agricultural work, or they have been. A combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of population over the country. Well, some of that I think has been implemented, but I'm not sure how far they want to go with that. Free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production. Well, that's certainly well underway. I mean, it's more of an indoctrination that's going on. Our minds are constantly being invaded by legions of half truths, prejudices, and false facts. One of the great needs of mankind is to be lifted above the morass of false propaganda. And that's Martin Luther King. All propaganda has to be popular and has to accommodate itself to the comprehension of the least intelligent of those whom it seeks to reach. In other words, they want to reach out to idiots. They want everybody to be an idiot. They want low intelligence people. They don't want to really teach them anything of importance. The people will believe what the media tells them to believe. That's George Orwell. Hundreds of billions of dollars are spent every year to control the public mind. And this is actually, if you go and do a search for the false flag attacks, you'll come up with this 42 admitted false flag attacks. And then they even define it as a horrific stage event blamed on a political enemy and used as a pretext to start a war or enactment of draconian laws in the name of national security. Oh, we're only here to protect you. Yeah, I believe you. All false flag operations need willing accomplices in the news media. Okay, think about it. There would never be a false flag operation. I wouldn't say never, but rarely would a false flag operation be successful except that the news media is playing along. Absolutely, people. Although the FBI, okay, so there's a whole list of them, and I'm just going to go through some of the more recent ones. Like they go back a couple hundred years where they're talking about some of these false flags. So in this list, but this is number 30. Although the FBI now admits that the 2001 anthrax attacks were carried out by one or more U.S. government scientists, a senior FBI official says that the FBI was actually told to blame the anthrax attacks on Al Qaeda by White House officials. Remember what the anthrax letters look like? And that's a link there you can go see. Government officials also confirmed that the White House tried to link anthrax to Iraq as a justification for regime change in that country. Well, gee, that sounds like the fictitious weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. Okay, and so it was all orchestrated. Okay, that's one. Okay, um, and then if you go on and read this number 31, it says similarly the U.S. falsely blamed Iraq for playing a role in the 911 attacks, as shown by the memo from the defense secretary, as one of the main justifications for launching the Iraq war. Even after the 911 Commission admitted that there was no connection, Dick Cheney said that the evidence is overwhelming that Al Qaeda had a relationship with Saddam Hussein's regime, that Cheney was probably had information unavailable to the Commission, and that the media was not doing their homework in reporting such ties. Yeah, right. Top U.S. government officials now admit that the Iraq war was really launched for oil, not 911 or weapons of mass destruction, despite previous lone wolf claims. Many U.S. government officials now say that 911 was state sponsored terror, but Iraq was not the state which backs the hijackers. And then number 32. Former Department of Justice lawyer John Yoo suggested in 2005 that the U.S. should go on an offensive against Al Qaeda, having our intelligence agency create a false terrorist organization. It could have its own websites, recruitment centers, training camps, and fundraising operations. It could launch fake terrorist operations and claim credit for real terrorist strikes, helping to sow confusion within Al Qaeda's ranks, causing operatives to doubt others' identities and to question the validity of communications. Well, gee, that sounds like ISIS. That sounds just like what's going on, people. And then it goes on. That was 32. This is 33. United Press International reported in June 2005, U.S. intelligence officers are reporting that some of the insurgents in Iraq are using recent model Beretta 92 pistols, but the pistols seem to have had their serial numbers erased. The numbers do not appear to have been physically removed. The pistols seem to have come off a production line without any serial numbers. Analysts suggest that the lack of serial numbers indicates that the weapons were intended for intelligence operations or terrorist cells with substantial government backing. Analysts speculate that these guns are probably either Mossad or CIA. Analysts speculate that agent provocateurs may be using that untraceable weapons even as U.S. authorities use insurgent attacks against civilians as evidence of the legitimacy of the resistance. Okay, so, gee, that sounds like what's going on today. Number 34, undercover Israeli soldiers admitted in 2005 to throwing stones at other Israeli soldiers so they could blame it on Palestinians as an excuse to crack down on peaceful protests by the Palestinians. So you had some Israeli soldiers that were throwing rocks at other Israeli soldiers so then they could murder some Palestinians. Okay, that's exactly what's going on, people. At number 35. Quebec police admitted that in 2007, thugs carrying rocks to a peaceful protest were actually undercover Quebec police officers. Okay? And so that's going on in Canada, people. At the G20 protests in London in 2009, British Member of Parliament saw plainclothes police officers attempting to incite the crowd to violence. Okay? That's in England, people. 37. Politicians admitted that government employees looted priceless museum artifacts in 2011 to try to discredit the protesters. 38. A Colombian army colonel has admitted that his unit murdered 57 civilians, then dressed them in uniforms and claimed they were rebels killed in combat. So this is the kind of people these are, okay? These people are Satanist people. This is what the so-called government is. They're nothing but a bunch of murderers. That's exactly what they are. 39. The highly respected writer for the Telegraph, Ambrose Evans Pritchard, says that the head of the Saudi intelligence, Prince Bandar, recently admitted that the Saudi government controls the Chechen terrorists. Well, hello, Putin. Are you aware of this? I'll bet he is. Number 40. High-level American sources admitted that the Turkish government, a fellow NATO country, carried out the chemical attacks blamed on the Syrian government, and high-ranking Turkish government admitted on tape plans to carry out attacks and blame it on the Syrian government. Okay, so hello, people. That's what's going on. This is what they're getting ready to drag us into their war based on all this. Number 41. The former Ukrainian security chief admits that the sniper attacks which started the Ukrainian coup were carried out in order to frame others. Well, we all remember those sniper attacks, and that was the government that was doing it. Number 42. Britain's spy agency has admitted that it carries out digital false attacks on targets, framing people by writing offensive or unlawful material and blaming it on the target. In addition, 2/3, okay, well, and this goes into like in when Rome burned, okay? So the point being is that these people, there is nothing that is below the dignity of these people. They will do anything, they will murder you, they will do anything to promote their satanic agenda, whatever it is. And this next part here is when Rome burned. In addition, 2/3 of the city of Rome burned down in a huge fire on July 19th, 64 AD. There's a friend of mine that even talks about Nero fiddling while Rome burned. The Roman people blamed the Emperor Nero for starting the fire. Some top Roman leaders, including Roman consul Cassio Dio, as well as historians like Suetonius, agreed that Nero started the fire, based largely on the fact that the Roman Senate had just rejected Nero's application to clear 300 acres in Rome so that he could build a palatial complex, and that the fire allowed him to build his complex. Gee, isn't that convenient? Regardless of who actually started the fire, Nero, in the face of public opinion accusing him of arson, falsely blamed the Christians. okay, for starting the fire, then rounded up and brutally tortured and murdered scores of them, okay? Again, these people are Satanists. This is what's coming, people. This is what's happening all over, okay? And this is what's coming here. If you don't think so, hello, wake up. These digital false flag operations that they were including in number 42, okay? That if they're putting offensive and unlawful material on the internet to frame people, what about these bank account security breaches that happen every once in a while, or the IRS security breaches? You don't think that's the government? Of course it is. Other government security breaches. They go and do it so that they can promote their agenda. That's exactly what they're doing. It seems like every day they're blaming North Korea, China, or Iran for some government security breach. That's exactly what they're doing. These people are Satanists. They're promoting their agenda, and their agenda has nothing to do with your rights or your freedom or anything except their agenda. Next, they'll be forcing you to send your sons and daughters to some foreign country to participate in a mass murder of their foreign counterparts as part of a satanic blood sacrifice to Molech. That's exactly what they're planning, people. Wake up. You're the father of the devil, and the lusts of your father he will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he's a liar and the father of it. And that's in John 8:44. And Revelations 21:8 says, but the fearful and the unbelieving and the abominable and the murderers and the whoremongers and the sorcerers and the idolaters and all liars shall have their part at the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Okay, and that's these people. Okay, and the fearful is you people that are cowards and refuse to stand up and say anything about it. That's yeah. I think you might be falling into that category. You ought to think about that. Political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable. By which he also went and preached to the spirits in prison, and that's found in 1 Peter 3:19, and in Isaiah 24:21-22. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high. That's these Satanist pigs. That's who this is talking about. And the kings of the earth and upon the earth, and they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and they shall be shut up in prison. And that's all these liars. That's all these murderers. That's the bitch, okay? The queen, the bitch. Don't disrespect dogs in Canada. I certainly wouldn't want to say anything negative about dogs. Dogs don't stab you in the back. If you're their enemy, they let you know up front. The greatest single tool of oppression is ignorance. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. There's two enemies of the people, are criminals and government. So let us tie the second down with the chains of the Constitution, so the second will not become the legalized version of the first. Well, people, the second has become the legalized version of the first. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. And that's exactly what's happened today. Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they'll believe it. That's Hitler. And that's what we have today. Smells like bullshit. Oh, it's just the mainstream media. The CIA owns everyone of any significance in the major media. And that's former CIA Director William Colby. Conspiracy theorist is a person that doesn't watch as much TV as you do. Greatest danger to American freedom is a government that ignores the Constitution. Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. And then we told them that the spying is supposed to keep them safe. If we remain silent, then our popularly elected government violates the laws it is sworn to uphold and steals the freedom we elected it to protect. We will have only ourselves to blame when Big Brother is everywhere. Somehow I doubt my father's generation fought the Nazis in the Second World War only to permit a totalitarian government to flourish here. And that's Judge Andrew Politano. Fascism is the power to open terroristic dictatorship of the most reactionary, the most chauvinistic, the most imperial elements of finance capitalism. Well, gee, that sounds like the bankster thieves and their owned and operated news media. And that comes from Karl Marx. Fascism is more appropriately called corporatism because it is a merger of state and corporate power. And that's Mussolini, and that's exactly what we're got. And we have a fascist government. Mussolini defined fascism as the union of state and corporate power. Using that definition, can we claim that North America is anything but fascist? It's exactly right. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all the property till their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And that's exactly what's going on, people. Hello, wake up. The end of democracy and the defeat of the American Revolution will occur when government falls into the hands of lending institutions and moneyed in corporations. Well, isn't that what's happened? The government went bankrupt in 1932. That's exactly what's happened. It is the duty of the patriot to protect his country from its government. Thomas Paine. These prostitutes are symptomatic of a corporate takeover that is taking place. All so-called courts are corporate courts in business to make a profit. All government codes, rules, and regulations are actually corporate in nature. Current police state is an example of corporate code enforcers. See martial laws here video or the bankrupt corporate government's videos. These prostitutes publish bought and paid for lies. These prostitutes are owned and operated by the New World Order crowd like George Soros and the Queen, the bitch. No disrespect to dogs intended. These prostitutes are Satanists. We all need to find alternative sources of information. The only reason I ever watch the prostitutes is so I know what lies they want everybody to believe. And we all have to look at it in that point of view. So now you're a watchman. But if the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned that the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity. But his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. You're now a watchman. Please circulate this video far and wide. Other videos, Bankster Thieves 1, 2, and 3, Churchianity series, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 and 2, Unidroit, Martial Laws here, The War on Terror is a War on You, De facto courts, all courts are ecclesiastical courts, DC courts in Texas, and jurisdiction. Copy of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants. I have Yahoo videos that are videos of private information shares that show these and other court citations that are available for a donation. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept IOUs, Federal Reserve notes, PayPal gifts, checks, money orders. Send me an email for particulars. Contact information, I have a blog. It's at sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com, a website at sovereigntyinternational.fyi. Email address is right there, and my YouTube profile is Sovereign Living, all one word. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video, and I hope you got something out of it. And I hope that you can spread it around and share it with others so that we